Good evening. My name's Andy, and I'm pastor of First Baptist Church. I want to welcome you to our Wednesday evening check-in. Whether you're joining us on Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. or any other time in the week, we're glad that you're here. And I hope that to share some things tonight with you that will apply to your everyday life. Before Easter, we're looking at some different spiritual disciplines, practices that we can adopt or adapt in our life to open up our hearts and make avenues where we can meet God. And so we've talked about prayer and meditation. Tonight I want to talk to you about fasting. And so, but I want to begin with a song. I was flattered the other day when someone said, well, you haven't played the guitar on the Wednesday evening for a while. So I want to play a beautiful song that reminds us of the goodness of God. I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. So good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I'm going to do that chorus again. All my life you have been faithful, All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. Recently, someone asked me about my relationship and awareness to God, and I was able to say I don't recall a time in my life that I did not understand that God loved me. And I attribute that to family because from my earliest understanding of myself and of anyone's love for me, my earliest conscious understanding of it, I understood that God loved me. I hope that's a testimony that you can say, but if you can't, maybe today's the day that you can comprehend and appreciate God's love in your life. So I want to talk with you a minute about fasting. You know, there are a lot of reasons people might fast. Sometimes people fast to lose weight or to clean up their diet. You know, they partially fast from something. There are people who fast to call attention to a situation, maybe a hunger fast or a hunger strike. And in that, in that area, the goal is to call attention to something. Or the goal would be to lose weight, or the goal would be to clean up the diet. Well, I want to talk to you about spiritual fasting. And here, the goal in spiritual fasting is you abstain from food for a spiritual purpose. And that's to recognize that you are sustained not by the nourishment you take in your mouth, but you are sustained by God, the one who has created you. And so, the first time I ever heard about or thought any about fasting, I believe I was in college, and I had friends who were in a different denomination. I grew up Baptist. I've been Baptist since -9 months. Please don't hold it against me. But I had some friends from other denominations who practiced Lent, that 40 days prior to Easter, where oftentimes people will fast and give up something. my introduction to it was someone giving up, chocolate or coffee, or caffeine or soft drinks or something like that. Throughout the years since then, since I was in college, I have practiced Lent, and oftentimes I've given up something. But the purpose in giving up something was to take on something else of a spiritual nature. For instance, instead of in the morning having a certain food, you spend that time in prayer. Or instead of having dessert, you make it a point to pray after each meal for needs in the world or in your family. You can imagine the different things that you could do. Fasting for a spiritual purpose. Jesus assumed that fasting is not a commandment, but Jesus assumed that we would fast. And I want to read a couple of verses from Matthew chapter 6. Jesus, and this is in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus has talked about prayer. And I'm going to start with verse 16. Jesus said, "And whenever you fast," again, he's assuming that we would fast, "do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so as to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you." And that speaks to a motivation for fasting. He had just talked to the disciples and his followers about praying. He said, don't pray on the corners to be noticed by others for your appearance or for the phrases that you use or for your great vocabulary. He said, pray in your closet where only God will see you. And with fasting, go about your daily life. Don't emphasize the fact that you're hungry or you're suffering because you're giving up something, but give up something so that you can pay extra close attention, extra close attention to God. It was not uncommon in the Jewish faith for people to fast once a week. It was not uncommon for more devout individuals to choose to fast more than that. In the Christian tradition, there have been times in history when people have fasted, perhaps maybe on Friday. John Wesley, a founder of the Methodist Church, encouraged people to fast on Wednesdays and Fridays. And again, the goal was not to prove how tough you were to be able to avoid food. The goal in the right setting is to take that time away from filling your earthly needs to focus on God. In a way, I believe fasting in our time, it would be quite powerful if you would choose to practice it. Because if you think about driving down the interstate, what do you notice when you start coming to new cities? It's signs for food. When you take any exit, the first thing you see, particularly at night, are the brightly lit food signs. We revolve around that. But what if you said, I want to do without something for a period of time so that I can focus on God? So I want to encourage you to, if you have not ever tried this, I want to encourage you to take a baby step. And here's how I want to encourage you. I'm going to tell you about a friend of mine. His name was Kevin, and he had a son who was in high school, and his son had 2 or 3 good options for his future. His son was a senior, a bright guy. He had the option to join the Marines. He had the option to go to the local community college and stay with his parents, and he had the option to go off to school. Okay, so 3 really good options there. And Kevin just felt this burden to lift up his son in prayer. Kevin and I were colleagues in North Carolina, and so one day I asked Kevin if he wanted to go to lunch, and he said, well, I'm not eating lunch on Friday. He skipped lunch every Friday. He said, what I do, and he told me about his son and told me about these decisions his son needed to make, and he said, here's what I do. Every Friday, I don't eat my lunch, and I spend 1 hour not eating lunch, but in intense prayer for my son's future. He said, you'd be welcome to join me. And you know what? I decided rather than eating that meal, I would join him. And so for an hour, we met together and we talked. He kind of filled me in on what was going on. We prayed a little out loud, then we prayed on our own for a lot of things, but we prayed for his son and for his son's future. That's the spirit, I think, of what fasting is. It's doing without something that you can do without for a while, doing without something that you have an appetite for, so that you can focus on something spiritual and something of God. That encounter happened more than 10 years ago. That Friday lunch happened lunchtime, happened more than 10 years ago. But to this day, I see that as a beautiful picture of the spirit of what fasting can be. Doing without food for a brief time so that we can focus on things of God. So I'm going to ask you, and sometimes because of health conditions or because of for whatever reason, you might not be able to fast. I understand that. It's not a thing to earn a merit badge. But I want to encourage you to instead of one meal, spend your time in prayer. Prayer for a loved one, maybe prayer for a decision that you need to make, maybe prayer for our church and our community, or if you're watching this somewhere else for your church and your community, maybe prayer for a neighbor. Fasting is a way that we can take our attention off the thing that we're hungry for, like food in the moment, and focus on God's nourishment and God's sustenance. Jesus assumed that we would do these things. He said, when you fast, don't fast like the hypocrites who are trying to just call attention to themselves. Fast so that you can focus closely and precisely and intently upon God. So I want to challenge you to do that. Thank you for being here, and I want to close. Maybe just play this chorus again. We haven't sung it in a long time at church. I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life I've been faithful. You have been faithful. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. The Lord be gracious to you and give you peace. Amen.